We're going to go over a few terms and we're going to show a few examples of what these movements would look like. So today I have with me a helper named Joe. This is Joe, and he's just going to help show what some of these movements look like. So our first term is going to be flexion. This is a movement that decreases a joint angle, usually in the sagittal plane. So as Joe brings the weight up, that's going to be your flexion movement. So go ahead and show us the flexion one more time. So that is your flexion movement. So our next term is going to be extension, which is a movement that straightens a joint and generally returns a body part to the zero position. So as Joe brings the weight down, go ahead and bring the weight down for us one more time. This is going to be your extension movement. Okay, Joe, we're done with the weight. Our next term is going to be abduction. You can kind of think of this as a superhero pose, as his legs are going to be spread apart. And abduction, this is the movement of a body part in the frontal plane away from the midline of the body. Okay, Joe, you can return to a normal position. So our next term is going to be adduction, which is a movement in the frontal plane toward the midline. So think of bringing a sword straight up in the air and then bringing it straight down. Go ahead and show us that one more time. Straight up and then straight down. That is going to be your adduction. So our next movement is going to kind of reflect what it would look like as pushing a door. So with both hands, you can show an example of protraction as pushing a door. This is the interior movement of a body part in the transverse horizontal plane. Okay, Joe, you can return to your normal stance. So our next term is going to be retraction, which is a posterior movement, and this would look like pulling a bow back. So as Joe has an imaginary bow, he is pulling his bow back. So go ahead and pull the bow back for us one more time. This is going to be an example of retraction. So our next term, Joe, you can return to your normal stance, is circumduction. This is one end of an appendage remains fairly stationary while the other end makes a circular motion. So this is going to be just a circular motion with your arm, would be one example. Okay, you can return to your normal position. So our next term that we have is going to be rotation. This is a movement in which a bone spins on its longitudinal axis. So this, if you were to put your arms and kind of doing a circular motion with your shoulder, this would be an example of rotation. Okay, Joe, you can return back to your normal stance. Our next term is supination. This is a movement that turns the palm to face anteriorly upward. So this is just going to be your typical palms up as a way to remember it. Okay, Joe, you can return to your normal stance. Our next term is pronation, which is the opposite movement, which is the palm to face posteriorly or downward. So just simply way to remember it as palms downward. Okay, Joe, you can return to your normal stance. Our next term is dorsiflexion. This is a movement in which the toes are elevated up as one might do when they would apply nail polish. Maybe not for a guy necessarily, but this is what it would look like, just toes pointed up. Okay, Joe, you can return to your normal position. And actually, can you just show us that toes up one more time? Okay, thank you. And that was dorsiflexion. Our last one is plantar flexion, which is a movement of the body so the toes point downward, as in you're pressing a gas pedal or maybe even a drum pedal. And I can show you an example of that over here. Like let's say you have a drum pedal and you push down with your feet. That would be a good example. So those are the terms. Thank you, Joe, and I hope you have a better understanding of the terms. Thanks. Bye.